Welcome back, WNST. Exciting Monday Night Football game downtown, and certainly a less than thrilled crowd on Monday night, but nonetheless, the Ravens move on after dispatching of the Houston Texans and another backup quarterback in Tom Savage on Monday night. This guy covers all things Houston sports as a longtime sports talker at 790 down in Houston, but also the voice of the Houston Rockets and also a Houston Astros supporter. You know, before I get going, kicking you guys down the curb here about the backup quarterback and beating your football team, that was a nice little run for your baseball team, Matt Thomas, down there in Houston. Are you still champagne-soaked from the aftermath of all of that?
Let me tell you, your introduction to me in that whole 30 seconds was way more exciting than the game Monday night in your beloved city. Truth be told, we are absolutely still bonkers about the World Series championship. And for the first time, and I've spent 18 of my 23 years on air in this market, with the Rockets playing as well as they did, including Monday night's victory against Brooklyn and their fantastic start with Chris Paul and James Harden, acting his besties on the floor. You have the World Series championship. The Texans have taken third place in this market, and that has not happened in a very, very long period of time. So, there has just been very minimal interest in the team. Now, obviously, if Deshaun Watson is playing, it's a whole different story. If J.J. Watt is healthy, if Whitney Merciless is healthy, I can go on and on and on with the injuries. But it is more about baseball. I get more phone calls asking about a certain Baltimore reliever. Can he come to the Astros after all? And I'm like, let's just slow down. We did just fine without him.
I ran into Duquette in the airport last week. I could have had a talk with him for you if you need some help there with that.
Well, I want to make sure is he healthy and if he's still available. But, that's not here nor there. That's all in the past, my friend. We got the ring, baby. We got the ring.
It is amazing, right? Like, so I'm a Baltimore dude. I've been doing sports radio here for 26 years. Been in the market 33 years, covering sports around here for a living. I'm sort of famously thrown out of the baseball ballpark by the old man that owns the team here. But, man, when I started my career, it was all baseball, all baseball. It was all Cal Ripken. It was all Camden Yards. Then we got this football team, and you're in that other market. Dude, I was a huge Houston Oilers fan. I go back with McLean so far to my Oiler fandom back in the 1980s and early 90s. And, you said that they've drifted to the bottom of the pile in Houston. Well, that was the Oilers story there after a while. And in a state that loves football, no less, we're in a baseball community here that isn't a baseball community anymore. And we had 30,000 empty seats at our football game on Monday night. There really is a malaise going on that if you're not winning the World Series, the Astros 4 years ago had a 0 television rating. It really is.
And I was on those pregame shows on TV. I was fantastic, too.
And your wife and kids were watching, so it wasn't really a 0,
Well, actually, only 40% of the marketplace got that TV network, so they didn't get to see me once. But that's, again, you're bringing up a lot of sore subjects, friend. Why are we going down this road? The Astros are the World Series champions.
But they're not our team. Record. That's the problem. You're trying to take the relief pitcher we have. Take Machado with him. Just take Adam Jones and Buck. Take them all at it because they're all going to be out of here this time next year anyway. Matt Thomas joining us here. You can follow him. Matt's a great follow. Tens of thousands do follow him at SportsMT out on Twitter. And, of course, the voice of the Houston Rockets, but a Texans guy. So, from the Texans standpoint, the one thing that jumps out from a guy like me sitting in the upper deck on a cold night with my wife is, boy, Hopkins, special player, and Clowney, special player. You notice them at every play. So I see optimism there, especially now that you got a quarterback. I don't know whether Watt's ever going to come back and be that guy and where Merciless is and being gone this year, but there's a sadness for me, for you and your fan base, that this probably could have been a pretty good year for the Texans there had it not been for the injuries to some key people.
Yeah, the problem is, out of camp, the offensive line was a hot mess. It's still a hot mess. You saw that last night. And there was somebody in the Texans camp that thought that Tom Savage was going to be the guy starting the season. In fact, he did. Played a half against Jacksonville, was terrible, got replaced by Deshaun Watson, and then the Texans kind of had a rebirth in the first week of the season. And then Deshaun obviously goes down in practice a few weeks ago, and we see the labor of that and watching what the team is now. But, Will Fuller, the number 2 receiver, the couple-year player out of Notre Dame, is really exciting, but he can't stay healthy. Braxton Miller, the former Ohio State quarterback, is now one of the key number 2, if you want to call that wide receiver. So imagine how good, Nestor, DeAndre Hopkins would be if he had a legitimate complementary receiver on the other side of the field with him. So he is by himself with really the tight ends being the second biggest option for this team. He's beaten up. You saw the jersey being torn. He's constantly grabbed, pushed, kicked. He'll do his fair share of that as well. He gets one offensive PI per week as well. But he's fantastic. He is, I think, one of the best 50-50 receivers in the NFL, meaning the ball goes up in the air, he'll chip up and get it 50% of the time at least. And then on the other side, you saw how dominant J.D. Clowney was. So the reason for optimism is get everybody back. And you were right about J.J. Watt. I don't know what J.J. Watt's going to be. I mean, this is back-to-back season-ending injuries. I'd like to say that 70% of J.J. Watt next year would be just fine for this team, but I don't know if we'll get 70% of J.J. Watt ever again. I mean, he'll work his rear end off to make sure that happens. But there are some pieces. But the biggest problem is injuries have destroyed this team. The offensive line has been a mess, and there's just a lot of uncertainty about whether or not Bill O'Brien is the guy to lead this team. He's got 1 year left on his contract. As you know, most NFL coaches don't like to go into a lame duck year in their season. And it'll be very interesting to see how the team decides to move forward with Bill O'Brien, saying, look, we know what he did with Deshaun Watson as a quarterback. Let's give these guys an opportunity to work together. Bill may say, look, I don't want to stick around here if I can't get 2 or 3 extra years added to my contract.
Yeah, I go back to the J.J. Watt, throwing things around to, staged music in the middle of the night on a sound stage set across from the stadium there. And, I watched all the Hard Knocks. And I'll tell you this, man, special guy, special player, big injury. You say, well, can he come back or can he not? And then I'm watching Terrell Suggs come back from 2 crazy, devastating injuries into his 30s and play a football game like that on Monday night. I stand astonished, and I am admittedly not a big Terrell Suggs fan, nor have I been throughout his career for many, many reasons, partially because I sort of know him a little bit. But there is some maturity coming from him that I didn't see coming, and certainly some football coming from him that I didn't see coming. So I think that holds out some hope for a J.J. Watt-type player.
He works incredibly hard. He rehabilitates. As a matter of fact, he goes to the same sports medicine facility that I go to rehab my shoulders, and I'm not putting myself in the same category, Nestor, but the guy is just a beast, and he just always is working on it. In fact, they've told him on multiple occasions, slow down, let the healing process come into play. So if there's anybody in the National Football League that I would trust to try to come back and make it a go, it's J.J. Watt, and he is such a valuable member of our community with all the stuff going on with Hurricane Harvey. And, oh, by the way, when healthy, he's one of the best defensive players in the National Football League. So there is optimism on that. The biggest question is going to be, how bad does it get this year before the end of the year? I really believe at this point T.J. Yates will get an opportunity to get some snaps in because as Tom Savage at times shows improvement, he is still very vulnerable, holds the ball too long, stares down his receivers, and he's always, as I like to play a little sounder on my radio show, the obligatory strip sack, and we saw that again last night.
He is Matt Thomas. You can find him Sports MT. That's for Matt Thomas out on Twitter. Also the play-by-play voice of the fantastic Houston Rockets. Going to keep you busy 4 or 5 nights a week here for the next 6 months or thereabouts. Back to the Texans, and I guess just last thought on this because of the empty seats here. We've talked about the crowd problems here. You've already acknowledged that the Texans are somehow a deep number 3 in a state where they love football, in a town where they lost the football team. No different than here. I'm sure the empty seats are coming down the line here, and people not giving their tickets away, even though they're sold, which I find to be one of the weirder things, that you can't find somebody with a kid who would want to go to the game or whatever. And the weather's not all that bad there. It's a little chilly here. The McNair situation there and being number 3 in that marketplace in an NFL place where football sort of should be new and fresh as it is here, I guess all that's flavor of the month. But for McNair and picking up the pieces of the knee and the problems and the comments, how is that reverberated there? Because I'll tell you what, the Colin Kaepernick, pray for us comment from Bisciotti and the Ray Rice left hook and all of that plays into, and Ray Lewis, our history here in Baltimore, I'm a little worried about the league teetering right now. And I know you work on the NBA side of things. I think everybody would bet $1 on the NBA to be the strong league 10 or 20 years from now as opposed to the NFL for a lot of reasons.
Well, it's funny because, and Nestor, this may be a weakness on my part. I don't really get into a whole lot of that on my show because it fatigues me. I didn't get into sports radio to get into 80% politics, 20% sports. But, as our responsibilities go, we have to bring it up occasionally. All I will say is this. We are in a larger Republican part of the country, and I would think Bob McNair, feels like he's got a pretty good pulse on the team. I don't think there's a lot of people not going to the games because of the Kaepernick situation, or whether or not the team would have signed him or not signed him. The flag, the situation with Dwayne Brown and some of the comments he made. I think largely it's because the team just isn't doing particularly well. There are still going to be, now remember, NRG Stadium seats 72,000. There's still going to be 60, 65,000. I can't imagine it being 15, 20,000 because there are people in this town, Nestor, that, spend all their disposable income on Houston Texans football. They go to the tailgates. They get there early. They stay late. It is an event for them. And while there will be more empties than there have ever been before, I think, unless you're thinking about those 2-14 teams of a few years ago, people still want to go to the game. They'll still cheer, and they still want to put their uniforms on. So I think Houston may be a little bit different. I could never imagine 30,000 empty seats, and I could never imagine people ever going, hey, tickets are available, because the waiting list still is probably 10,000 deep for Texan season tickets. So, yeah, there'll be an effect like most teams would have if they're not winning, but one or two victories would change the attitude around these parts. Problem is, at this point, I just don't know where they're going to get those victories, except maybe when the Niners come to town here in a couple weeks.
Matt Thomas joining us here. He is Sports MT out on Twitter for all things Rockets as well as some Astros. He does some Texans at Sports Talk 790. This portion of our WNST programming brought to you by Costas Inn. Good enough for the Today Show and good enough for my mom. Fat crabs, cold beer. The legend continues. They also hosted our Hall of Fame party over there a couple weeks ago for my Dundalk High Hall of Fame nomination, as well as our CJ Mosley programming and our swabbing for There Goes My Hero. So big thanks to Pete and Nick at Costas. Also brought to you by King Discount Liquors. Lottery beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. I am out of Malbec. I'm almost out of tequila. I got to get over there for the holidays. Get over to Rosedale and give the King a ring and say hello to Paul King. Matt Thomas joining us here, Sports MT out on Twitter. All right, man, so you had all this fun with the Astros and stuff. Give me an Astros story I don't know. Give me one of the little nuggets about this thing, or a good story about where you were in the parade when you were getting champagne soaked.
Here's the problem, Nestor. I have been an Astros fan since 1979. I was an Astro Buddy, the little kids club where you get to meet a player, in 1980. My guy was Alan Ashby.
Alan Ashby. I would have wanted to meet Enos Cabell, but that's just because he had an Oriole background.
Enos is a good friend of mine, as a matter of fact. He gives me grief about all the silly callers I take on the Astros postgame show. So Enos still is with the organization, ironically enough. So,
and also in Bad News Bears Breaking Training Part 2, but I just, not that I know a little bit of weird trivia, but I know that.
No, well, I think you've had issues. That's fine. So here I am. So here I am as a longtime sports fan, as a longtime sports broadcaster, and I am calling the Rockets and the Knicks at the same time as a World Series game. So the Rockets, so I'm calling the game, and they bludgeon the Knicks. The Astros beat the Dodgers to win the World Series, and we decided to go in radio form. We went to 24 hours of live postgame conversation. So I jumped on our team flight, flew to Atlanta, got to Atlanta at 2:30 in the morning, set up my little access, my little radio equipment, and did 3 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock in the morning, talking to people, celebrating, people crying, people still high-fiving, people in the streets. So for personally, my story is I was 3,000 miles away from it, which was kind of bittersweet because I'm calling NBA games, but at the same time watching my team. So that was a little odd. But the whole part of it is that there were generations of people, Nestor, that have been so dormant for the Astros organization because they were so bad for such a long period of time. Calling in saying, thank God for the Astros. I really appreciate it. I love baseball. I've missed all this. So that was interesting point number one. Interesting point number two is Carlos Beltran has been a guy that, frankly, got paid $16 million last year to be the DH for this team, and he batted about .235, a little bit of power, didn't play a whole lot, never played in the outfield hardly, and would be classically considered a disappointment. To a guy, Nestor, every one of those guys, when they lost Game 6 and were really reeling and feeling the pressure of being in this World Series, being in Los Angeles at Dodger Stadium, every one of those guys said, if not for the positive encouragement, the leadership angle of Carlos Beltran, they would not have won Game 7. And that's why I believe at some point Carlos Beltran will be a Major League manager, because the way he's handled that clubhouse as a 40-year-old, or was a 40-year-old, and the leadership and the positivity for a guy that was playing once every 2 weeks was pretty damn amazing.
Matt Thomas with some great insights into the Astros. He's Sports MT out on Twitter for all things Houston sports and at Sports Talk 790. Anything you want to say about the Rockets or the NBA? It's early, but an interesting NBA year. But I'm still pretty convinced Golden State's going to win, right? I mean, and that's the hardest part.
Sorry.
Well, make your case for the Rockets to beat them in a 7-game series or anyone.
The Golden State's due to lose. I mean, how can I come to you and say that Golden State has any flaws? The Rockets are just playing incredibly well. I'll tell you. Let me give you the Rockets' case for them being better than a year ago. Chris Paul's the alpha dog now. Nestor, he doesn't have to be James Harden. They're a deeper team. P.J. Tucker, Luke Baamute has been fantastic. The rotation is good. When you have Ryan Anderson hitting shots at home like he didn't do last year, that helps the cause. You have Eric Gordon playing Six-Man of the Year role again for the second consecutive year. All these things come into play. It's a 9-man rotation that all can score. They're fluid. Their turnover counts are better. Their defense is better. It's just a better basketball team. So I'll say Rockets just got better, maybe enough to climb over that hump and beat Golden State.
Hey, Matt, I appreciate you making time, and I know you're a busy guy flying all over the place. We always love having you on the program, man. Safe travels to you. We'll be watching the Rockets red glare from afar.
Anytime, friend.
You got it. Matt Thomas joining us here, Sports MT out on Twitter and at Sports Talk 790. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Last but never least, if there's any breaking news that goes on here this week, heading into the Lions game, you'll get that first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzis will be here from 3 until 5, driving you home with the SSV on WNST this Thursday afternoon. Short week. Still monitoring the Orioles, still hanging out on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.